In Generation 2's Gold and Silver, every Ditto encountered in the wild could only produce shiny offspring if bred with a specific defense stat of exactly 10. In Ruby and Sapphire's code, shiny Spinda patterns were determined by a combination of personality value and a hidden algorithm that created over 4 billion possible appearances, meaning two shiny Spinda could look completely different from each other. Even in Sword and Shield, the square shiny animation had a reversed probability from what developers intended, making wild encounters rarer than breeding when the opposite was planned. Today, we're looking at obscure shiny Pokémon facts. The small, strange, or overlooked details that show how much is still tucked inside these games. And you can see it clearly in the way shiny mechanics were never actually explained in Gold and Silver. Players discovered them by accident. The sparkle animation that became iconic was originally just 3 frames of light programmed by a single developer who wanted to add something special to the Game Boy Color's palette capabilities. It wasn't named officially by Game Freak until Black and White, over a decade after the feature existed. Before that, the debug menu called them Rare Pokémon. Stadium 2 called them Color Pokémon. The community settled on Shiny because of the sound effect, and the name stuck so firmly that even Masuda didn't know fans had dubbed his breeding mechanic the Masuda method until years later during an interview. Before you drift off, maybe tap subscribe and tell me where you're watching from tonight. The original Shiny system in Generation 2 depended entirely on a Pokémon's individual values, the hidden numbers that determine stats. If the values aligned in a specific way, defense at 10, special at 10, and attack at 2, 10, or 14, the game would render a shiny. This created unintended consequences. Shiny Pokémon in Gold and Silver always had slightly lower attack stats on average because of how the values had to align. Female shiny starters were mathematically impossible in those games because gender was tied to the same stat requirements and the equations couldn't overlap. Every shiny Chikorita, Cyndaquil, and Totodile caught in Johto was male by design, not chance. Game Freak didn't realize this would happen until players started calculating the odds years later. Some species had better shiny odds than others purely by accident. Pikachu's gender ratio and stat spreads meant it had a 1 in 4,096 chance in Crystal, slightly better than the standard rate. Magikarp's stats made it one of the easiest Pokémon to encounter shiny, which is why so many early shiny hunters targeted the Lake of Rage. The Red Gyarados wasn't just a narrative device. It was a teaching moment coded into the game to show players that color variation existed, even if the game never explained how. The shift to Ruby and Sapphire changed everything. Shiny status was no longer tied to stats, but to something called a personality value, a hidden 32-bit number generated when a Pokémon appeared. That number determined everything from nature to ability to shiny status through calculations involving trainer ID and a secret ID players never saw. This meant shiny hunting became purely about probability, no longer influenced by breeding quirks. But it also meant every shiny lost the subtle stat difference they had before. By Generation 3, shiny Pokémon were identical to normal ones in every way except appearance. What most players don't know is that Generation 3's shiny palettes weren't designed by artists. They were generated by a shift in the color table, a programmatic reordering of hues that swapped certain values. This is why so many Hoenn shinies are green. The algorithm pushed blues and purples toward green tones because of how the Game Boy Advance processed color data. Developers didn't handpick these palettes until much later. James Turner, a designer at Game Freak, confirmed in an interview that he wasn't allowed to design custom shiny forms until Sun and Moon. Before that, it was a technical process, not an artistic one. This explains why some shinies look incredible while others barely change. The system wasn't built for aesthetic intent, it was built for efficiency. Shiny Spinda represents one of the most complex shiny mechanics ever programmed. Spinda's spots are determined by its personality value, creating billions of unique patterns. When a Spinda is shiny, the spots shift color, but the pattern remains tied to the same value. This means two things. First, encountering the same spot pattern on two different Spinda, one normal and one shiny, would require finding the exact same personality value under different ID combinations, a statistical impossibility. Second, documenting every possible shiny Spinda would take millions of encounters. Some estimate over 8 billion variations exist when combining shiny status with Spinda's pattern generation. No two players will ever encounter the same shiny Spinda unless they clone or trade the exact same one. The personality value system also controls shiny unknown forms. Unknown has 28 forms, one for each letter and 2 punctuation marks. When shiny, its form is locked to the personality value, just like normal unknown. But here's the strange part. Because of how the calculations work, certain unknown letters are statistically more likely to appear shiny than others. Unknown E and unknown T, for example, have slightly better odds due to how their form calculations overlap with shiny probability checks. The difference is tiny, less than 0.1%, but it exists in the code. Game Freak never mentioned this, and most players assume that all unknown forms have equal shiny rates. They don't. In Diamond and Pearl, the Poke Radar introduced the first controlled shiny hunting method. By chaining encounters of the same species, players could manipulate shiny odds down to as low as 1 in 200. But the radar had a hidden quirk. Shiny patches were determined the moment the radar activated, not when the player entered the grass. This meant the game decided which patch would contain a shiny before the grass even started shaking. Skilled players learned to read the shake patterns, recognizing that shiny patches shook differently than normal ones. The difference was subtle, a slightly longer animation and a unique sound frequency, but it became the foundation of competitive shiny hunting for years. Game Freak never explained this. Players had to discover it through frame-by-frame analysis. The Masuda method, named after Junichi Masuda, was implemented as a quiet bonus for international trading. If two Pokémon from games with different language tags bred together, the offspring had 5 times the normal shiny chance. Masuda coded this in Diamond and Pearl as a way to encourage global connectivity, but he never announced it. Players only discovered the increased odds through data mining. When asked about it years later, Masuda admitted he had no idea the community had named it after him. He called it a pleasant surprise, proof that players were paying closer attention to the code than he expected. In Black and White, shiny locks appeared for the first time. Certain Pokémon, like Reshiram, Zekrom, and Victini, were programmed to never appear shiny in normal gameplay, even though their shiny forms existed in the data. This created frustration among completionists who wanted shiny living dexes. But it also revealed something strange. Shiny locked Pokémon still had shiny sprites rendered in every battle and menu screen. The game actively checked if they were shiny and suppressed the palette swap in real time. This meant the game was doing extra work to prevent shinies rather than simply excluding the data. Developers later explained this was to preserve the narrative weight of legendary encounters. A shiny Reshiram appearing in the story would feel random and break immersion, so they forced the standard palette. Hidden grottos in Black 2 and White 2 had a strange quirk. Every Pokémon found in a grotto was guaranteed to have its hidden ability, and some had guaranteed items. But none of them could be shiny. The game checked every grotto encounter and forced non-shiny status even if the personality value would have made them shiny. However, if a player used external devices to modify their game, shiny grotto Pokémon could be generated and functioned normally. This confirmed the shiny lock wasn't about data corruption or technical limitations. It was a deliberate choice. Game Freak wanted grottos to feel special without overlapping with shiny hunting. But they never explained this decision in-game or in interviews. The shiny charm was introduced in Black 2 and White 2 as a reward for completing the regional Pokédex. It tripled shiny encounter rates by generating 2 extra personality values per encounter and checking each one for shiny status. What players didn't know was the shiny charm stacked with almost every other shiny hunting method. It worked with the Masuda method, with the Poke Radar, and even with chaining, creating compound probability that dropped shiny odds to as low as 1 in 512 under perfect conditions. But the charm had a strange exception. It didn't work on stationary legendary encounters in those games. A player could soft reset for a shiny Kyurem thousands of times with the charm and see no benefit. Game Freak patched this in later games, but the Black 2 and White 2 code explicitly excluded stationary legends from charm calculations. No explanation was ever given. X and Y changed shiny odds permanently. Base encounter rates dropped from 1 in 8,192 to 1 in 4,096, doubling everyone's chances overnight. This shift was never announced in promotional material. Players only noticed when data miners examined the game's code. Game Freak's philosophy had changed. They wanted shiny Pokémon to feel rare but achievable, and the old odds were discouraging casual players. But this change had unintended side effects. Longtime shiny hunters felt their accomplishments from older games were devalued. Forums debated whether pre-Generation 6 shinies were worth more because of the difficulty. Some players refused to hunt in newer games on principle, believing the magic was gone. The Friend Safari in X and Y is one of the strangest shiny mechanics ever added. Each Friend Safari had its own shiny rate, 5 times higher than wild encounters. But the game never mentioned this. Players assumed shinies were as rare as anywhere else until someone calculated the odds through brute force data collection. The Friend Safari also allowed hidden abilities, good IVs, and shiny status to stack on the same Pokémon, making it one of the most efficient hunting methods in the series, yet it was locked behind the online system and required friends to register their codes. This created an odd divide. Players with large friend lists had access to better shiny odds than isolated players, something Game Freak never balanced or addressed. Chain fishing in X and Y introduced a mechanic where consecutive successful fishing attempts increased shiny odds exponentially. At a chain of 20, odds dropped to roughly 1 in 100. But the mechanic was fragile. Moving from the fishing spot, encountering a non-fish Pokémon, or even failing to hook anything would reset the chain to 0. What made this mechanic obscure was that the game never tracked the chain number. Players had to count manually. There was no UI element, no notification, and no confirmation that chaining was even active. Some players fished for hours without realizing they had broken the chain dozens of times. Others stumbled into shiny Pokémon without knowing a chain existed. Game Freak designed the system to reward focus, but most players never knew it was there. Dex Nav chaining in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire worked differently from the Poké-Radar, and Game Freak never explained how. The Dex Nav tracked how many times a player encountered the same species, and shiny odds improved gradually as the count increased. But the odds weren't tied to consecutive encounters. A player could encounter a Poochyena, then switch to hunting Zigzagoon, then return to Poochyena and keep their previous count. This made Dex Nav chaining more forgiving than previous methods, but also more confusing. The game displayed the encounter count on the Dex Nav screen, but it never mentioned that the number influenced shiny rates. Players discovered this by comparing community data, not through official sources. The Dex Nav also had a hidden mechanic called search level, separate from encounter count. Search level increased every time the Dex Nav successfully detected a hidden Pokémon, even if the player didn't encounter it. At search level 100, shiny odds started improving. At search level 200, they improved again, but the game capped search level at 999, and reaching that required thousands of encounters. Most players never maxed out a single species because the grind was invisible. Game Freak embedded a long-term reward system that only the most dedicated hunters would ever see, and even they didn't know it existed until data miners pulled it from the code. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire also featured a unique mechanic for shiny legendary Pokémon: soft resetting for legends. Like Rayquaza or Deoxys worked as expected, but certain event-exclusive legends like Diancie were shiny locked. However, the games contained unused shiny palettes for these locked Pokémon, fully rendered and functional. This led to speculation that Game Freak planned to distribute shiny event versions later. Some were. Shiny Diancie was distributed at Japanese movie events. Others, like Shiny Hoopa, were never officially released. This means the data exists in every copy of the game, waiting in the code, inaccessible. A perfect shiny locked behind distribution decisions rather than gameplay. Sun and Moon introduced SOS battles, a mechanic where wild Pokémon could call for help. The longer the chain of SOS calls continued, the higher the shiny odds became. At a chain of 70, the chance of a shiny appearing was roughly 1 in 1024 when combined with the shiny charm. But SOS chaining required constant attention. Players had to knock out the ally Pokémon repeatedly without knocking out the original caller. If the original fainted, the chain reset. This created a strange rhythm. Players would bring Pokémon with moves like False Swipe to keep the caller alive, items like Lepa Berry to restore the caller's PP, and Adrenaline Orbs to increase call rates. It was a delicate balancing act that Game Freak never tutorialized. Players learned by experimenting, failing, and sharing strategies online. Ultra Wormholes in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon offered a different approach. The farther a player traveled into the wormhole dimension, the higher the shiny rate for Pokémon encountered there. At maximum distance, shiny odds were roughly 1 in 3 for most species. This made Ultra Wormholes the easiest way to hunt shinies in the series, but it came with a catch. Only certain Pokémon appeared in wormholes, mostly legendary Pokémon from previous generations. And the minigame required to reach maximum distance was tedious, involving motion controls and repetitive navigation. Many players found dozens of shiny legends in wormholes, while others gave up after failing the minigame repeatedly. Game Freak balanced ease with frustration, creating a mechanics that felt generous and exhausting at the same time. Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee were the first games to show shiny Pokémon directly in the overworld. No more random encounters hiding shinies in tall grass. If a shiny appeared, players could see it wandering before the battle started. This transparency changed everything. Shiny hunting became visual rather than statistical. Players could scan areas at a glance, looking for color differences instead of relying on encounter rates. But this also meant fleeing from a visible shiny felt worse. Watching it despawn because you didn't have Pokeballs was heartbreaking in a way the old system never was. Catch combos in Let's Go worked similarly to chains in other games. Catching the same species consecutively increased the shiny odds, maxing out at a combo of 31. But combos broke if the player caught a different species, if a Pokemon fled, or if the game was turned off. This made combo hunting stressful. A single mistake after hours of work reset everything. But Let's Go added something new: lure items. Using a lure increased the spawn rate of Pokemon, and higher tier lures increased the chance of rare Pokemon, including shinies. Combining a max combo with a max lure and the shiny charm created odds around 1 in 315. The system rewarded preparation and patience, but it also punished mistakes harshly. Pokemon Sword and Shield introduced square shinies, a variant with a different sparkle animation. Instead of stars, square shapes appeared during the shiny animation. The intended design was for square shinies to be rarer in wild encounters and more common in breeding. But the code was programmed backward. Wild square shinies had a 1 in 16 chance when encountering a shiny, and bred square shinies had a 15 in 16 chance. This meant wild square shinies were statistically rarer than intended, 1 in 65,536 without modifiers, while bred square shinies were nearly guaranteed. Game Freak never patched this, so the mistake became permanent. Players debated whether wild square shinies were more valuable because of the error, creating a strange secondary market for mistake-based rarity. The Dynamax Adventures in the Crown Tundra. DLC had the highest shiny odds ever programmed into a Pokemon game. With the shiny charm, legendary Pokemon encountered in Dynamax Adventures had a 1 in 100 chance of being shiny. This made hunting legends easier than ever before. But Dynamax Adventures had a quirk. The game didn't reveal if a Pokemon was shiny until the adventure ended and the player chose which Pokemon to keep. This meant players could encounter a shiny mid-run and not know until the results screen. Some players accidentally skipped shinies because they chose a different Pokemon from the run. Others caught multiple shinies in one session. The delayed reveal added suspense, but it also added regret. Pokemon Legends. Arceus introduced mass outbreaks, swarms of the same species appearing in specific zones. Outbreak Pokemon had significantly higher shiny rates, and clearing an outbreak increased the odds further. If a player encountered and caught every Pokemon in an outbreak without leaving the area, the final few encounters had shiny odds as low as 1 in 158 with a perfect Pokedex entry and shiny charm. But outbreaks were random. The game spawned them at unpredictable intervals, and players had no control over which species appeared. This created a lottery system. Players checked for outbreaks by traveling to camps and resetting until their target species spawned. Some spent days cycling through outbreaks. Others stumbled into shinies of species they weren't hunting. Arceus also introduced alpha Pokemon, larger and more aggressive variants. Alpha Pokemon could be shiny, and shiny alphas were considered the most prestigious catches in the game. But alpha spawns were tied to specific locations and had low respawn rates. Some alpha Pokemon only appeared during certain weather or time conditions. Shiny hunting alpha Pokemon required memorizing spawn points, cycling weather patterns, and resetting over and over. A single shiny alpha could take hundreds of hours. And yet, players chased them because of how they looked. A shiny alpha Garchomp, barely different in color from its normal form, but towering and glowing red-eyed felt mythical. Scarlet and Violet removed random encounters entirely, continuing the overworld visibility from Let's Go. Shiny Pokémon now appeared in the open world, glowing faintly with sparkles. This made shiny hunting more accessible than ever. Players could picnic to reset spawns, use sandwiches to boost shiny odds, and scan areas for glimmers. Shiny Charm plus a level 3 sparkling power sandwich plus a mass outbreak created odds around 1 in 512. This was the most generous the series had ever been, but it also meant shiny Pokémon lost some of their mystique. When shinies appeared multiple times per session, they stopped feeling like miracles. Some players celebrated the accessibility. Others mourned the loss of rarity. The sandwich system in Scarlet and Violet was deeply strange. Different ingredients created different powers, and the recipes weren't explained clearly. Trial and error became the meta. Players shared sandwich guides online, documenting which combinations gave which encounter power and which sparkling power. But sandwiches had a hidden timer. Powers lasted 30 minutes, and the clock ticked in real time, even if the game was paused. This meant players had to hunt efficiently once the sandwich was eaten. Wasting time traveling or navigating menus burned precious minutes. Competitive shiny hunters optimized routes, planned spawn cycles, and chased clusters of shinies before the timer expired. Scarlet and Violet also introduced Terra raid battles, where shiny Pokémon could appear in multiplayer raids. Terra raid shinies weren't determined when the raid spawned. They were determined when the player entered the battle. This meant 4 players could enter the same raid and each see different shiny or non-shiny results. One player might catch a shiny, while the other 3 caught normal versions of the same Pokémon. This caused confusion and frustration. Players couldn't share shiny raid coordinates the way they shared den coordinates in Sword and Shield. Shinies were personal, invisible to teammates until the catch screen appeared. Event distributions have always created exclusive shiny Pokémon. Some shinies, like the shiny Tapu Koko distributed for Sun and Moon, were only available during limited windows. Others, like the shiny Zeraora from Sword and Shield, required community participation in global challenges. These event shinies exist in permanent, shiny-locked status in standard gameplay, meaning the only way to obtain them is through distribution or trading with someone who attended the event. This creates a collector economy where old event shinies become more valuable over time as fewer remain in circulation. Some events were region-locked, available only in Japan or Korea, making certain shinies nearly impossible to obtain in other countries without importing or trading internationally. Shiny Pokémon and Pokémon Go follow completely different rules. Shiny odds in Geo are roughly 1 in 500, significantly better than mainline games, but they aren't influenced by traditional methods. JO doesn't have breeding or chaining. Instead, shiny rates increase during Community Day events, often rising to 1 in 25. This makes Go the easiest place to encounter shinies, but it also separates Go shinies from mainline game prestige. Some players view Go shinies as less valuable because of the higher rates. Others appreciate the accessibility. The divide mirrors the broader debate about whether easier shinies improve or harm the experience. Some of the rarest shinies in the series are tied to obscure mechanics. Shiny Manaphy could only be obtained by transferring a Manaphy egg from Pokemon Ranger to Diamond or Pearl and soft resetting before the egg hatched. The egg's shiny status was determined when it was sent from Ranger, not when it hatched, meaning players had to receive the egg, transfer it to Diamond or Pearl, soft reset, hatch it, check if it was shiny, and repeat if it wasn't. Only one Manaphy egg could be obtained per Ranger save file, so hunting shiny Manaphy required buying multiple copies of Ranger or coordinating with other players to borrow their cartridges. This made shiny Manaphy one of the most difficult shinies to obtain legitimately. Shiny locked Pokémon in Sword and Shield included the box legendaries Zacian and Zamazenta, but these locks were lifted in later distributions. Shiny Zacian and Zamazenta were distributed at GameStop and participating retailers during special events, meaning the only way to obtain them was by physically visiting stores during the event window. Players who missed the window or lived in regions without participating stores had no legitimate way to get them. This exclusivity created frustration and resentment, but it also made the distributed shinies feel more special for those who obtained them. The strangest shiny lock in the series belongs to Victini in Black and White. Victini was the first Pokémon in the National Dex order for Generation 5, number 494. Its shiny form existed in the game's data, fully programmed and functional, but encountering Victini in Liberty Garden required activating the Liberty Pass event, and the event forced Victini to be non-shiny. Later distributions of Victini through Mystery Gift were also shiny locked. This meant shiny Victini was completely inaccessible through legitimate means for years. Eventually, a shiny Victini was distributed in Japan during a movie event, making it one of the rarest event-exclusive shinies in existence. Some Pokémon have had their shiny forms changed between generations. When sprites transitioned to three-dimensional models in X and Y, some shiny palettes were adjusted to look better in the new lighting engine. Charizard's shiny black color became slightly lighter in three-dimensional space to ensure contrast against darker backgrounds. Gengar's shiny form, which was a barely noticeable darker purple in two-dimensional sprites, remained nearly identical in three-dimensional models, leading to criticism that shiny Gengar was too subtle. But Mega Gengar's shiny form was bright white, a stark contrast that made the Mega Evolution highly sought after. If you're still awake halfway through, maybe subscribe before you drift off, and tell me what time it is where you're watching from. Shiny Pokémon have been used symbolically in official media. In the anime, Ash caught a shiny Noctowl in the Johto arc, a rare acknowledgement that shiny Pokémon existed in the show's canon. Later, a character named Hazel appeared, whose entire goal was to collect shiny forms of every Pokémon species, mirroring real-world shiny hunters. The anime rarely showed shinies after that, likely to avoid making them feel too common. But their appearances were always treated as special, highlighting how even the show recognized the cultural weight of shiny encounters. The shiny sprite for Ponyta in Generation 2 used flames-colored blue instead of orange, creating one of the most visually striking early shinies. This design choice was intentional. Artists wanted shiny Ponyta to resemble ghostly fire, referencing myths about spectral horses. Rapidash inherited the same blue flames, and the color scheme became iconic. When three-dimensional models were introduced, the blue flames were preserved and enhanced with particle effects, making shiny Rapidash one of the most visually impressive shinies in the modern games. Players frequently cited it as an example of how good shiny designs could be when artists put thought into the palette. Shiny Umbreon and Espeon were designed with opposite intentions. Umbreon's normal form had yellow rings on black fur, and its shiny form swapped the yellow for blue, making it look colder and more distant. Espeon's normal lavender color became lime green in its shiny form, a jarring shift that divided fans. Some loved the bold change, others felt green Espeon looked unnatural. This difference in reception highlighted the challenge Game Freak faced with shiny designs. Subtle changes felt lazy, but dramatic changes risked alienating players who preferred the original aesthetic. Regional forms introduced in Generation 7 created new shiny forms for old Pokémon. Alolan Vulpix and Ninetales had ice-type forms with white and blue coloring, and their shiny forms shifted toward purple and silver. Alolan Exeggutor's shiny form turned the normal yellow and green into bright gold and red, making it one of the most vibrant shinies in the game. These regional shinies showed that Game Freak was willing to experiment with palettes again after decades of algorithmically generated colors. The shift toward artist-designed shinies in Sun and Moon gave the series a second chance to create memorable color schemes. Galarian forms in Generation 8 continued the trend. Galarian Rapidash's shiny form combined pastel blue and pink, evoking cotton candy and fairy tales. Galarian Slowbro's shiny form turned its shell from purple to orange, a shift that felt natural and appealing. These designs proved that when artists controlled shiny palettes, results improved dramatically. But this also meant older Pokémon with bad shiny forms were left behind. Game Freak showed no signs of retroactively updating old shinies, so Pokémon like shiny Garchomp, barely distinguishable from its normal form, would remain disappointing forever. The cultural phenomenon of shiny hunting created its own language. Players referred to successful hunts as finding the sparkle or seeing stars. Long hunts were called grinds, and failed hunts where a shiny fled or was knocked out were called phase failures. Some hunters streamed their hunts live, broadcasting hours of repetitive encounters to audiences who watched for the moment of success. These streams created a strange form of entertainment where the appeal wasn't the content itself, but the anticipation of a rare event. Watching someone encounter their target, shiny after thousands of resets, felt communal, a shared celebration of patience rewarded. Some players engaged in challenge hunts, self-imposed restrictions that made shiny hunting harder. Hunting shinies in games without the shiny charm, hunting full odds shinies without using any rate-boosting methods, or hunting shiny legendary trios where all three had to be shiny before progressing were common challenges. Others hunted shiny Pokémon with specific traits, like shiny Pokémon with perfect stats, or shiny Pokémon in rare Pokéballs, like Dream Balls or Apricorn Balls. These challenges turned shiny hunting into an art form, a way to demonstrate mastery and dedication. Some of the longest documented shiny hunts took years. A player hunting shiny Rayquaza in Emerald Soft reset over 50,000 times before encountering one. Another player hunting shiny Latias in Soul Silver documented their journey over 3 years and 60,000 resets. These extreme examples showed the statistical reality of shiny hunting. Even with good odds, unlucky players could spend lifetimes chasing a single Pokémon. And yet, they continued. The psychology behind shiny hunting is fascinating. Players knew the odds were against them, but the sunk cost fallacy and the allure of eventual success kept them resetting. Some shinies are culturally iconic beyond the games. Shiny Charizard's black and red color scheme made it one of the most recognizable shinies in the franchise. Shiny Rayquaza's black body, instead of green, became a symbol of prestige. Shiny Metagross shifted from blue to silver, making it look sleeker and more metallic. These shinies transcended rarity and became aspirational. Players wanted them not just because they were rare, but because they looked better than the originals. This created a hierarchy within shiny culture where certain shinies were more desirable than others regardless of how hard they were to obtain. The Pokémon trading card game introduced shiny Pokémon as special variants with unique artwork and foil patterns. Shining Pokémon in the Neo Revelation set were some of the earliest examples, featuring shiny Gyarados, Raichu, and Mewtwo. Later sets introduced shiny vault subsets, where entire collections of shiny Pokémon were printed as ultra-rare pulls. These cards became highly valuable, with some selling for hundreds of dollars in mint condition. The crossover between video game shinies and card game shinies created parallel collector cultures, each with its own rarity metrics and economic systems. Shiny Pokémon have influenced competitive play minimally. Since shinies are identical to normal, Pokémon in stats and abilities, their presence in competitive battles is purely cosmetic. But some players bring shiny teams to tournaments as a show of dedication. Seeing a full team of 6 shinies in a championship match signaled that the player was not just skilled, but also patient, willing to invest hundreds of hours into aesthetic perfection. This added a layer of respect among competitors, a silent acknowledgement that the person across from you had earned their team twice over. Event-exclusive shiny Pokémon sometimes came with special moves or abilities unavailable through normal gameplay. The shiny Pichu event in Heart Gold and Soul Silver distributed a Pichu with Volt Tackle that, when brought to a specific location in the game, triggered an event with the spiky-eared Pichu. This tied shiny status to narrative progression, making the shiny Pichu more than just a collectible. It was a key to unlocking hidden content, a design choice Game Freak rarely repeated, but one that showed they understood shinies could be meaningful beyond color swaps. Some shiny Pokémon have appeared in spin-off games with exclusive availability. Shiny Celebi was distributed through Pokémon Crystal's Virtual Console release as a bonus for completing certain tasks. This made shiny Celebi available outside of events for the first time in decades, but only to players who owned the digital version of Crystal. Physical cartridge players were excluded. These distribution decisions created access inequality, where the method of purchase determined eligibility for rare content. Shiny hunting strategies have evolved into precise sciences. Players optimize every variable: encounter method, location, time of day, game version. Some strategies involve manipulating the game's random number generator, predicting when shiny frames will occur based on starting seed values. RNG manipulation allowed players to encounter shinies without excessive grinding, but it required technical knowledge and external tools. Purist hunters rejected RNG manipulation, considering it cheating. Others embraced it as efficiency. The debate mirrored broader gaming culture tensions between legitimacy and convenience. One of the strangest shiny encounters in the series is shiny Arceus. Arceus was distributed through events in Generation 4, and those events were shiny locked. But later events in Generation 5 distributed Arceus without shiny locks, allowing players to soft reset for shiny Arceus legitimately. However, the event was only available in Japan, and the distribution window was narrow. This made shiny Arceus one of the rarest legitimate shinies in existence. Cloned versions circulated online, making it impossible to verify authenticity without checking the event ribbon data. Pokémon Home tracks shiny status across games, allowing players to transfer shinies from older generations into newer ones. This created a shiny preservation culture where players maintained living dexes of shiny Pokémon spanning multiple generations. Some collections contained hundreds of shinies gathered over decades. Transferring a shiny Pokémon from Game Boy Color games to modern Switch titles required moving it through 6 console generations, each with different transfer mechanics. The effort symbolized continuity, proof that patience and care could carry a single Pokémon across 20 years of hardware evolution. The emotional weight of encountering a shiny after a long hunt is difficult to overstate. Players describe the moment as surreal, a blend of disbelief and elation. Some recorded their reactions, uploading videos of themselves shouting or crying when the sparkles appeared. These moments captured something universal about anticipation and reward. The hunt wasn't just about obtaining the Pokémon, it was about enduring the process, proving to yourself that persistence matters. Every shiny told a story of patience. Some players tattooed their first shiny Pokémon on their bodies. Shiny Umbreon, shiny Ninetales, and shiny Rayquaza were common choices. These tattoos represented more than fandom. They symbolized milestones, memories frozen in ink. One player explained that their shiny Gardevoir tattoo reminded them of the summer they spent hunting it during college. The Pokémon became tied to that time in their life, a marker of who they were and what they cared about. In this way, shinies transcended the games, becoming personal artifacts, shiny fails, moments where a shiny Pokémon fled or was accidentally knocked out, haunted hunters. Stories of shiny fails circulated like ghost stories. A player encountering shiny Mewtwo in Fire Red but running out of Pokeballs. Another player finding shiny Rayquaza in Emerald but having it struggle to death. These failures were painful because they represented wasted luck, the awareness that the universe aligned perfectly and the player wasn't ready. Some hunters never recovered from shiny fails, abandoning hunts permanently. Others used failures as a motivation, vowing never to be unprepared again. Community challenges brought hunters together. Events like Shiny Deck's Community Days encouraged players to share their progress, compare hunts, and celebrate each other's successes. These challenges created camaraderie among people who might never meet in person but shared a singular obsession. The shared experience of waiting, resetting, and hoping built connections stronger than most online interactions. In a way, shiny hunting became its own social space within the larger Pokémon community. Some of the most dedicated hunters maintained spreadsheets tracking every hunt. Encounter numbers, methods used, time spent, and date completed were logged meticulously. These records served as both documentation and motivation. Seeing hundreds of completed hunts in a spreadsheet reinforced the reality of progress, proof that even the longest grinds eventually ended. Some shared their spreadsheets publicly, creating archives of collective effort that others could study and learn from. Certain shiny Pokémon have become memes within the community. Shiny Bidoof, a beaver Pokémon with modest stats, was celebrated ironically as the ultimate shiny because of how common Bidoof was in Sinnoh games. Encountering shiny Bidoof felt like a joke, a waste of luck on an unremarkable Pokémon. But over time, shiny Bidoof became a badge of honor. Players posted screenshots of their shiny Bidoofs with captions like, "The god has appeared." The irony transformed into genuine affection, and shiny Bidoof became one of the most beloved shinies despite its humble origins. Shiny Wooloo in Sword and Shield represented the opposite extreme. Wooloo's shiny form was a soft pastel blue instead of white, and its gentle appearance made it immediately popular. Players hunted shiny Wooloo not because it was competitive or rare, but because it was cute. The shiny became iconic within hours of Sword and Shield's release, flooding social media with screenshots. This demonstrated that good design could elevate a Pokémon beyond its in-game utility. Aesthetics mattered, sometimes more than stats. Some hunters specialized in specific categories. Type hunters pursued shinies of every Pokémon in a single type, like all water types or all dragon types. Regional hunters focused on completing shiny Pokédexes for individual regions, ignoring national dex entries. generational hunters aimed to catch every shiny introduced in a single generation. These specializations allowed hunters to set achievable goals within an otherwise overwhelming challenge. Completing a full shiny Pokédex across all generations would take years, but completing a shiny Unova Pokédex felt manageable. Shiny hunting during global events like the COVID-19 pandemic saw a resurgence. Players stuck at home turned to long-term projects, and shiny hunting provided structure and goals during uncertain times. Some hunters reported completing more shinies during 2020 than in the previous 5 years combined. The meditative rhythm of hunting offered comfort, a predictable task in an unpredictable world. For many, their quarantined shinies held special significance, reminders of resilience during difficult circumstances. The psychology of shiny hunting involves delayed gratification, a trait increasingly rare in modern gaming. Most games offer constant feedback and rapid rewards. Shiny hunting does the opposite. Hours can pass without progress, and success is never guaranteed. This appeals to certain personality types who enjoy long-term projects and delayed payoffs. The act of hunting becomes its own reward, a form of meditation through repetition. The shiny itself is almost secondary. What matters is the process, the commitment to seeing something through, despite uncertainty. Shiny Pokémon have appeared in official merchandise sporadically. Shiny Charizard, Shiny Rayquaza, and Shiny Gyarados have been featured on plushies, figurines, and promotional artwork. These products cater to collectors who want physical representations of their favorite shinies. But availability is inconsistent. Most shinies never receive merchandise, making the few that do feel even more special. Owning a plush of your favorite shiny becomes another form of collecting, parallel to the games. Some shiny hunters document their journeys through video series. Channels dedicated to shiny hunting upload episodes showing the entire process from start to finish, including failures, long stretches of nothing, and the eventual success. These series attract audiences who find the persistence inspiring or the randomness entertaining. Watching someone hunt for months and finally succeed creates narrative tension, even though the outcome is inevitable given enough time. The uncertainty of when it will happen sustains interest. The shiny Pokémon phenomenon has inspired fan-made tools and applications. Shiny tracking apps allow hunters to log encounters in real time, displaying live probability updates and estimated time to success based on current odds. Some apps include motivational quotes or community features where hunters can share progress and encourage each other. These tools exist outside official support, built by fans for fans, demonstrating how deeply embedded shiny hunting is in Pokémon culture. Certain glitches in older games allowed players to encounter shinies under unusual conditions. The cute charm glitch in Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum used a specific trainer ID and a Pokémon with the cute charm ability to force shiny encounters at a rate of roughly 1 in 21. This glitch required precise setup, including manipulating the game's random number generator during character creation to generate the correct trainer ID. Players who successfully executed the glitch could hunt shinies far more efficiently than intended, but the setup was complex enough that most casual players never attempted it. Those who did called it one of the best exploits in the series. Shiny locks in newer games frustrated completionists who wanted to collect every shiny legally. When shiny locks extended to legendary Pokémon Central to the story, like Solgaleo and Lunala in Sun and Moon, players felt robbed of the satisfaction of resetting for them. These locks were justified by developers as maintaining narrative consistency, but players argued that the choices should belong to them. The tension between design intent and player freedom created ongoing debates about whether shiny locks were necessary or punitive. Shiny Ditto has unique implications in breeding. While breeding with a shiny Ditto doesn't increase shiny odds directly in most games, the Masuda method requires Pokemon from different language games. A Japanese shiny Ditto, traded to an English game, allows players to breed with the Masuda method while also producing eggs faster because Ditto can breed with any Pokemon. This made shiny Ditto highly sought after in trading communities. Players offered rare Pokemon in exchange for foreign Dittos, creating an entire economy around breeding efficiency. The introduction of marks in Sword and Shield added another layer to shiny collecting. Marks are special titles Pokemon can have, like the Anxious or the Sleepy, displayed when sent into battle. Certain marks are extremely rare, and hunting a shiny Pokemon with a specific mark is exponentially harder than hunting just the shiny. Some hunters pursue marked shinies as the ultimate challenge, combining multiple layers of RNG into a single goal. A shiny with a rare mark and perfect stats is one of the hardest legitimate achievements in the series. Certain Pokemon are more popular to hunt than others. Starter Pokemon, pseudo-legendaries like Larvitar and Beldum, and fan-favorite designs like Eevee and Vulpix dominate shiny hunting discussions. This popularity creates a feedback loop. Guides and strategies focus on popular hunts, making them more accessible, which increases their popularity further. Obscure Pokemon like Finneon or Stunky rarely appear in shiny hunting content, not because they're harder to hunt, but because fewer people care about them. Shiny hunting has influenced game design subtly. The addition of mechanics like outbreak systems, sandwich boosts, and visible overworld shinies shows Game Freak recognizes shiny hunting as a core part of player engagement. These features balance accessibility with challenge, making shinies attainable without removing the satisfaction of rarity. This design philosophy reflects broader shifts in gaming toward respecting player time while maintaining long-term goals. Some shiny forms become retroactively popular due to cultural shifts. Shiny Sylveon's blue and pink color scheme gained prominence as players associated it with trans pride colors, leading to it becoming an icon within LGBTQ Pokemon communities. Game Freak never commented on this association, but players embraced it, using shiny Sylveon as a symbol of identity and representation. This organic adoption showed how player interpretation could add meaning to game elements beyond their original design. Shiny Pokemon represent the intersection of chance, commitment, and community. They exist in every game, waiting silently in the code. Most players will never encounter one without trying, but those who do chase them find something deeper than a color variant. They find a reason to keep going, a goal that demands patience, and a reward that feels personal. In a series about collecting, shinies remind us that not everything can be caught easily. Some things require time, and maybe that's the point. The earliest shiny hunters didn't have communities or guides. They discovered the mechanic by accident, shared stories on early internet forums, and pieced together strategies through trial and error. These pioneers laid the groundwork for everything that followed. Their documentation, their theories, and their persistence created the foundation of Vemur shiny hunting culture. Without them, shinies might have remained obscure, known only to those lucky enough to stumble upon one. Shiny Pokemon have no competitive advantage. They don't hit harder, tank better, or move faster. Their value is entirely aesthetic and sentimental, and yet they've become one of the most enduring aspects of the franchise. This demonstrates something fundamental about human nature. We value things not for their utility, but for their meaning. A shiny Pokemon means patience, It means dedication. It means a story worth telling, and that's worth more than any stat boost. In older games, transferring shinies forward required careful planning. The PAL Park in Generation 4 only allowed 6 Pokemon per transfer per day, meaning moving an entire shiny collection took weeks. Later transfer methods like Poke-Transporter and Pokemon Bank streamlined the process, but each step still carried risk. A corrupted save file, a lost cartridge, or a failed transfer could erase years of work. Hunters backed up saves obsessively, paranoid about losing their collections. This fragility made shinies feel precious, digital artifacts that could vanish without warning. The sound design of shiny encounters varies across games. The original sparkle sound from Generation 2 was a simple chime, clear and bright. Later games added layers, synthesizing the sound with orchestral flourishes or electronic effects. Some players prefer the classic chime, associating it with nostalgia. Others appreciate the modern iterations, finding them more dramatic. The sound itself triggers emotional responses in experienced hunters, a Pavlovian association between audio cue and reward. Shiny Pokemon have been featured in special in-game events. The aforementioned Shiny Haxorus in Black 2 and White 2 was handed out at a nature preserve, a guaranteed shiny with perfect IVs. This gift felt generous, a developer acknowledgement that not everyone had time to hunt. But it also sparked debates about earned versus given shinies. Some felt the gifted shiny diminished the achievement of hunting one. Others appreciated the accessibility. These debates highlighted philosophical divisions within the community about what shinies should represent. Some players hunt shinies in games without shiny odds improvements, called full odds hunting. This means ignoring the shiny charm, avoiding chaining methods, and relying purely on base encounter rates of 1 in 8,192 or 1 in 4,096, depending on the generation. Full odds hunters view this as the purest form of shiny hunting, a test of dedication unassisted by modern conveniences. Completing a full odds shiny living dex is considered one of the greatest achievements in Pokémon, requiring thousands of hours and unwavering commitment. Shiny Pokémon in raids have specific mechanics that vary by game. In Sword and Shield, raid dens could be manipulated using date-skipping exploits to re-roll encounters until a shiny appeared. This method, called den manipulation, allowed players to hunt shinies far more efficiently than random encounters. Game Freak patched some exploits in later updates, but others persisted. Den manipulation created ethical debates. Was it cheating, or was it clever use of game mechanics? The community never reached consensus. Certain shinies are harder to see. Shiny Pikachu's slightly darker yellow is nearly indistinguishable in poor lighting. Shiny Garchomp's barely noticeable color shift from blue to dark blue makes it one of the most criticized shinies in the series. Players joked that shiny Garchomp wasn't worth hunting because you couldn't even tell it was shiny without checking the summary screen. This criticism led to louder calls for Game Freak to redesign old shinies, though such updates remain unlikely. Shiny Zapdos, Articuno, and Moltres are among the most iconic shiny legendary birds. Zapdos shifts to orange instead of yellow, Articuno becomes purple, and Moltres turns pink. These designs work because they maintain the bird's elemental associations while offering dramatic visual changes. Players hunting the legendary birds often spent weeks soft resetting in front of stationary encounters, saving before each attempt, and resetting after failures. The isolation of these hunts, alone in a cave or tower, added to the meditative quality of shiny hunting. Some shiny Pokémon are tied to specific time-limited events that will never return. The shiny Genesect distributed during Generation 5's promotional period, the shiny Darkrai from older mystery gift events, and various Japan-exclusive distributions are impossible to obtain now through legitimate means. These time-locked shinies exist in a strange space, artifacts of moments that passed. Collectors who missed them can only trade for clones or hacked versions, which lack the authenticity of event-original Pokémon. Shiny hunting during Pokémon game launches creates unique challenges. Early in a game's life cycle, strategies haven't been optimized, and community knowledge is incomplete. First-week shiny hunters experiment with methods, sharing findings in real time as the meta develops. This collaborative discovery process mirrors the experience of early Pokémon fans before the internet, relying on word of mouth and experimentation. Being among the first to hunt a new shiny carries prestige, proof of dedication before guides existed. Certain locations in Pokémon games are famous for shiny hunting. The Safari Zone in Fire Red and Leaf Green, where Pokémon could flee at any moment, made shiny hunting stressful. Finding a shiny in the Safari Zone meant balancing bait, rocks, and Pokeballs, praying the Pokémon wouldn't flee before capture. Some hunters avoided the Safari Zone entirely because of the risk. Others embraced the challenge, considering Safari Zone shinies the ultimate test of luck and skill. The Dream World in Black and White allowed players to encounter Pokémon with hidden abilities, but Dream World Pokémon couldn't be shiny. This limitation frustrated hunters who wanted hidden ability shinies, forcing them to breed Dream World Pokémon with normal shinies to eventually produce hidden ability shiny offspring. The breeding process took longer, but it was the only way to combine traits. This added complexity to shiny hunting, layering ability inheritance onto rarity chasing. Shiny hunting has therapeutic qualities for some players. The repetitive nature of encounters, the focus required to maintain chains, and the eventual payoff create a loop that reduces anxiety for some individuals. The predictability of the process offers control in a way that daily life often doesn't. Completing a hunt provides closure, a tangible accomplishment in a hobby often dismissed as trivial. For these players, shiny hunting isn't just a game, it's self-care. Some shinies are functionally useless in battle, but highly prized for aesthetics. Shiny Magikarp's gold coloring makes it iconic despite Magikarp's weakness. Players hunt shiny Magikarp specifically because it's famous, not because it evolves into a useful Pokémon. The cultural weight of gold Magikarp exceeds its in-game value, demonstrating how mythology and aesthetics drive collecting behavior as much as utility. Pokémon Colosseum and XD Gale of Darkness on GameCube featured shadow Pokémon that could be shiny. Shadow Pokémon had fixed stats and natures, but shiny status was still determined by personality value. This made shiny shadow Pokémon possible, but extremely rare. Hunting shadow shinies required saving before each encounter, battling the shadow Pokémon, checking if it was shiny, and resetting if it wasn't. Some shadow Pokémon were one-time encounters, meaning failing to catch them locked them out permanently. This made shadow shiny hunting one of the most high-stakes hunts in the franchise. Shiny Pokémon have influenced fan-created games and ROM hacks. Many fan games increase shiny rates to make them more common, while others introduce new shiny palettes entirely, creating custom shinies that don't exist in official games. These creative reinterpretations show how deeply players engage with shiny mechanics, treating them as a canvas for personal expression. Some ROM hacks feature shiny-only runs, where every Pokémon encountered is shiny, inverting the rarity and creating a visually distinct playthrough. The longest documented shiny hunts often involve soft resetting for legendary Pokémon. These hunts can exceed 100,000 resets, taking years to complete. The persistence required is almost incomprehensible to non-hunters. But those who complete ultra-long hunts describe them as transformative. The act of committing to something so uncertain and seeing it through builds confidence that extends beyond gaming. The lesson isn't about shiny Pokémon, it's about persistence itself. Some players avoid shiny hunting because of the time investment. They recognize the appeal, but can't justify the hours required. This represents a valid approach to gaming, prioritizing efficiency and progression over collecting. The Pokémon series accommodates both playstyles, offering shinies for those who want them, but never requiring them for completion. This flexibility is one of the series' strengths, allowing players to define their own goals. Shiny Pokémon exist in a strange space between accomplishment and luck. Skill influences preparation and method selection, but ultimately, RNG determines success. This blend of agency and chance mirrors life more than most game mechanics. You can do everything right and still fail, or you can stumble into success by accident. The lack of control frustrates some and fascinates others. Those who embrace the randomness find peace in accepting what they cannot change. Even after decades, shiny Pokémon continue to shimmer at the heart of what makes the series magical. That soft blend of mystery, patience, and peace. It's easy to forget how much these small moments of light can mean until you've seen one yourself. That instant when a familiar color changes. When sparkles bloom across the screen like tiny stars always feels like catching a piece of the impossible. No matter how many times it happens, it never feels routine. It always feels like the world has paused for you, like something hidden and gentle has finally revealed itself. For many trainers, shiny hunting isn't just gameplay, it's ritual. The quiet repetition of encounters becomes its own rhythm, like the sound of rain against glass. The looping background music, the slow, soft resets, the whispers of just one more try. They create a strange, meditative calm. The act of searching becomes an act of reflection. When a shiny finally appears, it's not just about catching it. It's about realizing that patience, persistence, and peace can exist side by side in even the simplest of games. Every shiny encounter carries a memory that lasts far beyond the screen. The place you were sitting, the time of night, the feeling of disbelief, all become attached to that color. Years later, you can still remember your first shiny and exactly how it happened. Some describe it as one of their favorite gaming memories, not because of the Pokemon's strength, but because of the journey it represented. A shiny Pidgey caught in after 2 weeks of hunting means more than a legendary Pokemon caught in 5 minutes. Rarity transforms ordinary creatures into personal legends. The connection between shiny Pokemon and player identity runs deeper than most realize. Some hunters keep spreadsheets tracking every encounter, documenting the date, time, location, and method used for each shiny obtained. These records become personal histories, journals written in sparkles and resets. Looking back through years of documented hunts reveals patterns and dedication, showing which months were most productive, which games received the most attention, and which Pokémon took the longest to find. The spreadsheet transforms from data into autobiography. Other hunters create photo albums of their shinies, taking screenshots at meaningful locations or poses. A shiny Luxray photographed at sunset in the wild area. A shiny Melodic swimming through Sootopolis City's crater lake. A shiny Absol standing alone on a mountaintop. These images become art, compositions that blend the Pokemon's aesthetic with environmental storytelling. Some players print and frame their favorite shiny screenshots, treating them as legitimate photography worth displaying. The social aspect of shiny hunting creates unexpected friendships. Online communities dedicated to shiny hunting foster relationships between people who might never have connected otherwise. A teenager in Brazil and a retiree in Sweden bond over hunting shiny beldum. A college student in California and a teacher in Japan trade tips for outbreak chaining. The shared language of shiny hunting transcends geographic and cultural boundaries, creating a global network united by patience and sparkles. Some communities organize group hunts where multiple players hunt the same target simultaneously, racing to see who encounters it first. These races add competitive energy to an otherwise solitary activity. The first person to post their shiny in the group chat receives congratulations and celebration from everyone else. Then the race continues until everyone succeeds. This transforms individual grinding into communal experience, proof that even repetitive tasks become meaningful when shared. Shiny fails remain the most painful experiences in hunting culture. The stories circulate like cautionary tales. A player encountering shiny Entei in Crystal, but forgetting to save beforehand, watching helplessly as the game froze. Another hunter finding shiny Latias in Ruby, but running out of Ultra Balls, forced to use a Pokeball with a catch rate near zero, watching it break free and flee. These moments haunt hunters because they represent not just bad luck, but preventable mistakes. The preparation checklist becomes sacred after experiencing a shiny fail. Some shiny fails involve mechanical knowledge gaps. Early hunters didn't know that roaming legendaries like Entei, Raikou, and Latios could flee on the first turn. Encountering a shiny roamer unprepared meant watching it vanish immediately, leaving only the memory and the haunting knowledge that it still wandered the game somewhere, impossible to relocate. Later generations fixed this with moves like Mean Look and abilities like Shadow Tag that prevented fleeing, but the damage to early hunters' psyches was permanent. The most tragic shiny fails involve accidental knockouts. A player hunting shiny Rayquaza who forgot to remove their lead Pokemon's Earthquake, watching in Pisces. Horror as the critical hit KO'd the shiny before they could react. Another hunter whose shiny Beldum used Takedown and knocked itself out from recoil damage. These accidents happen in seconds, leaving hunters staring at blank screens, processing what just occurred. Some never hunt that species again. Shiny hunting has inspired creative challenges that push the boundaries of dedication. The Professor Oak Challenge combined with shiny hunting requires players to catch every available Pokémon in an area before progressing, and every Pokémon must be shiny. This turns a 10-hour game into a 1,000-hour ordeal. Only a handful of players have completed shiny Professor Oak challenges, documenting every step through video series that span years. Another extreme challenge involves hunting shiny ribbons. Certain Pokemon games award ribbons for specific accomplishments, and collecting all ribbons on a single Pokemon requires transferring it through multiple generations and completing dozens of tasks. Doing this with a shiny Pokemon adds aesthetic pride to functional achievement. A shiny Pokemon with all ribbons represents the pinnacle of dedication, a creature that has traveled through time and trials, accumulating proof of mastery along the way. Shiny Badge Quest challenges require players to obtain a shiny Pokemon before earning each gym badge, meaning 8 shinies minimum per playthrough. Some extend this to include Elite Four and Champion encounters, pushing the requirement to 13 shinies. These challenges force hunters to use early game areas with limited encounter diversity, making each shiny harder to obtain through sheer repetition. Completing a shiny badge quest proves patience on a scale most players never attempt. The rarest shiny in existence depends on how rarity is defined. If judged by obtainability, event-exclusive shinies that were distributed once in limited regions rank highest. Shiny Arceus from the 2015 Japanese movie distribution. Shiny Diancie from the 2014 events. Shiny Genesect from 2013. These Pokémon can't be hunted in-game, making them functionally extinct for players who miss the distribution windows. Trading for them requires trusting strangers on the internet, and verifying authenticity is nearly impossible without forensic analysis of event data. If rarity is judged by difficulty, full odds shiny hunting in Generation 2 ranks highest. The 1 in 8,192 odds, combined with limited hunting methods and no quality of life features, meant encountering a shiny required supernatural patience. Players who obtained multiple shinies in gold, silver, or crystal without using breeding exploits demonstrated dedication that borders on obsessive. These hunters represent the old guard, the foundation upon which modern shiny culture was built. Some players combine shiny hunting with other collection goals, creating compound challenges. Hunting shiny Pokémon with perfect IVs, 6 stats at maximum, requires breeding thousands of eggs even with modern methods. The odds of hatching a shiny with perfect stats naturally are astronomical, 1 in several million. Players use techniques like the Masuda method, combined with Destiny Not breeding and Everstone nature control to improve odds, but even optimized, the process takes hundreds of hours per Pokémon. Others hunt shiny Pokémon in specific Pokéballs. Apricorn balls from Heart Gold and Soul Silver, available in limited quantities per playthrough, became status symbols when used to catch shinies. A shiny legendary Pokémon in a Heavy Ball or Love Ball signaled not just patience, but meticulous planning. Players coordinated trades across games, transferred balls forward through generations, and calculated capture rates to ensure success. The aesthetic of matching ball to Pokémon color scheme became an art form. The Dream Ball, a special Pokéball from Generation 5's Dream World, became highly coveted for shiny hunting in later generations. Dream Balls had unique animations and could only be obtained through specific methods. Catching a shiny Pokémon in a Dream Ball required either extreme luck in the original Dream World or careful breeding in later games to pass down the ball through inheritance. The exclusivity made Dream Ball shinies among the most prestigious catches in trading communities. Shiny hunting in ROM hacks and fan games creates alternative experiences. Some ROM hacks increase shiny rates to 1 in 100, making shiny hunts faster but less meaningful. Others decrease rates to 1 in 16,000, making them even rarer than official games. Certain hacks introduce new shiny palettes, redesigning colors that Game Freak created poorly. These custom shinies exist in legal gray areas, prized by some and dismissed by others as non-canon. Randomizer ROM hacks add chaos to shiny hunting. Randomizers shuffle which Pokémon appear in each location, meaning a player might encounter a shiny legendary in the opening route, or spend hours searching for a common Pokémon that was randomized into a rare slot. Shiny hunting and randomizers requires flexibility, accepting whatever the game provides, rather than targeting specific species. The unpredictability appeals to some hunters, offering variety that standard games lack. The ethics of shiny hunting occasionally spark debate. Time-based exploits, like changing console clocks to manipulate raid dens or outbreak spawns, fall into ethical gray areas. Some players consider clock manipulation cheating, arguing it subverts intended mechanics. Others view it as harmless efficiency, noting the game allows date changes and doesn't penalize players for using them. These debates reveal broader tensions in gaming culture about legitimacy versus convenience. Hacked shinies flood online trading systems, making authenticity verification critical for serious collectors. Genned Pokémon, created through external software but identical to legitimate catches in every detectable way, circulate freely. Some trading communities ban genned Pokémon outright. Others allow them if they're legal, meaning they have stats and moves possible through normal gameplay. The inability to definitively prove a Pokémon's origin creates trust issues that complicate trading. Certain tells indicate hacked shinies. Event Pokémon with incorrect ribbons or dates outside distribution windows. Shiny Pokémon caught in Master Balls but marked as hatched from eggs. Impossible combinations like shiny locked legendary Pokémon from the wrong generation. Experienced traders learn to spot these inconsistencies, but sophisticated hacking tools create increasingly convincing fakes. The arms race between hackers and collectors continues with each new game. Some players embrace hacked shinies for convenience, arguing that grinding for hundreds of hours isn't fun for everyone. They use gen teams for competitive play, valuing time savings over bragging rights. This pragmatic approach prioritizes gameplay over collection, separating the joy of battling from the tedium of preparation. These players represent a significant portion of the community, often silent, because admitting to using genned Pokémon invites judgment. The philosophy of what makes a shiny valuable divides the community. Purists argue only self-caught shinies have meaning, that the journey defines the reward. Others value aesthetics over origin, happy to trade for shinies they couldn't obtain themselves. Some collect shinies as art pieces, appreciating color schemes without caring about stats or legitimacy. These perspectives coexist within the community, occasionally clashing, but mostly respecting different approaches to the same hobby. Shiny hunting streams on platforms like Twitch and YouTube create a unique form of entertainment. Viewers watch streamers reset for hours, chatting and waiting for the moment of success. The appeal lies in shared anticipation, the communal experience of witnessing rarity together. When the shiny appears, chat explodes with excitement, celebrating as if they caught it themselves. This parasocial participation transforms solitary grinding into group activity. Some streamers specialize in extreme challenges, like hunting shiny legendary trios, where all three must be shiny before progressing. These streams last weeks or months, building narratives around the hunt. Viewers return daily to check progress, invested in the outcome. The streamer becomes a character in a story about persistence, and the audience becomes the chorus, commenting on every reset and cheering every success. The line between gaming and performance blurs. Shiny hunting during charity streams adds philanthropic purpose to the grind. Streamers commit to hunting until a shiny appears, while viewers donate to causes. The hunt's length directly correlates to donation totals, creating incentives for both streamer and audience. These events raise thousands of dollars, proving that shiny hunting's meditative nature translates well to fundraising marathons. The sparkle becomes a symbol of collective goodwill. The sound of a shiny appearing triggers Pavlovian responses in experienced hunters. The distinct chime followed by sparkles creates instant adrenaline spikes, even when heard outside of gameplay. Some hunters report hearing phantom shiny sounds during normal encounters, their brains so trained to listen for the cue that they hallucinate it. This auditory conditioning demonstrates how deeply shiny hunting embeds itself in neural pathways. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed drifting through these quiet facts, there's another video waiting on the left of your screen. Maybe let it play while you rest. You might learn something new before you drift off again.